Imagine waking up one day and realizing that the very people you've spent your life chasing, the ones whose approval you crave, the ones whose admiration you think you need to survive, they no longer exist. They vanish, not in the literal sense, but in a far deeper, more unsettling way. One day, they simply stop mattering. There's no great cosmic shift, no dramatic event that triggers their disappearance, no falling out, no grand betrayal. It's more subtle. It's as if, with every passing moment of self-realization, they fade from your internal landscape like a fog receding under the morning sun. The need for their validation, their presence, their gaze, dissolves. It's not that they've left you, it's that you no longer care. You no longer need them to define your worth. You've become, in a strange, unexpected way, indifferent to the opinions that once dictated your life. This is the paradox, isn't it? You spent years, maybe even decades, seeking love, attention, and approval from others, believing that these external affirmations were the key to your happiness. And then, in a mysterious twist, you realize, when you finally love yourself, they vanish. But the question arises, why did it take so long? And more pressing still, why does it feel so unsettling to let go of them? Why does the very act of embracing yourself seem to remove the one thing you thought you couldn't live without? The constant need for others to validate your existence. Does this mean that all those years of seeking approval were nothing but a distraction? Does it mean you've wasted your life in pursuit of something illusory? Or is it that you've simply reached a point where you can finally see through the mirage and realize that the need for external validation was never as necessary as you thought? You might feel a rush of freedom, an exhilarating sense of liberation, but if you're honest with yourself, there's also something else. A quiet sadness, maybe even a fear, lurking in the background. Because for most people, self-acceptance is not a destination. It's a slow, painful unraveling of everything they thought they knew about their identity. What happens when the external world that once shaped you begins to fade into irrelevance? What happens when the approval of others no longer carries the weight it once did? It's a profound crisis of identity, a breakdown of the very structures that once held you together. But at the same time, it's a moment of radical transformation. The moment when you stop looking outside yourself for answers and begin to look inward. But here's the catch. What happens if the world outside doesn't change in the way you expected? What happens if, in fact, the people you once sought approval from keep playing their same roles, but you no longer see them as they once were? What happens when you realize that the world you've been operating in was built on the very lie you've been feeding yourself? That love, worth, and belonging cannot be found in others, but only within. So now, the question is, if the people who once defined you vanish in this internal shift, what remains? What happens to you when everything you thought you needed to feel whole is no longer essential? How do you rebuild yourself when the very foundation of your identity crumbles? You've spent so much of your life trying to be seen, to be wanted, to be loved by others. But what if the greatest act of love you could give yourself was not to seek validation, but to realize you've always had everything you needed within? What if the love that could save you from this existential bind has always been available, just waiting for you to notice it? This is the great paradox. The very thing you've sought your whole life, others' love and approval, has always been an illusion, a fleeting reflection of your own internal need to feel complete. And now, when you finally stop chasing, when you stop needing, they disappear, not because they don't matter, but because you no longer need them to matter. It's as though the world has been playing a game with you, and you've only now figured out the rules. But the deeper question remains. Why does this process, this shedding of external validation, feel so alienating? Why does it feel like you're losing something important, when in fact, you're gaining something infinitely more valuable? What if the key to unlocking your true self is precisely in letting go of the external illusions you've built your life around? What if the vanishing of others is not a loss, but a sign that you've finally begun to stand alone, whole and complete in yourself? This is where we must pause, because in order to truly understand what happens when others vanish from your life, you need to first understand why they were there in the first place. Why did you seek them out? Why did you allow your sense of worth to hinge on their approval? And what does it really mean to love yourself in a world that tells you your worth must be determined by others? The answer to these questions lies in understanding the deep psychological and philosophical roots of human identity and how, in our quest for connection and belonging, we may lose sight of the one thing that can set us free, the ability to love ourselves fully, without conditions, without external validation. Stay with me as we explore this hidden truth and why it might just be the most revolutionary realization of your life. You've probably heard the phrase, "You can't love others until you love yourself." It sounds simple enough, but what does it actually mean to love yourself? And why does this elusive self-love seem so difficult to attain? In the modern world, we're told that love comes from the outside in. We are raised with the idea that love and validation must be earned through external achievements, our grades, our looks, our social status, our relationships. Love, approval, and respect are framed as something we must prove worthy of. This constant seeking can become an addiction, and the external validation we crave feels like a never-ending race, one that we often never win because the finish line keeps moving. Yet here's the truth: we are born with the ability to love ourselves, but somewhere along the way, we lose sight of it. We become disconnected from our core self and begin to rely on the world around us to tell us who we are and whether we matter. The process of seeking approval, the deep yearning for external validation, is an unconscious defense mechanism, a way to fill a void we didn't even know existed. This leads to an unspoken contradiction. We think we need others to validate our worth, but in truth, it's the search for that validation that keeps us from finding the self-love we seek. The more we look outside ourselves, the more lost we become. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, understood this more profoundly than perhaps anyone else. He spoke about the persona, the mask we wear to meet the world's expectations. The persona isn't the true self. It's the version of ourselves we create to gain approval from others, to avoid rejection. The more we identify with the persona, the further we drift from our authentic self, and this is where the trap lies. In our constant desire to be seen in a certain way, we sacrifice our true nature. Jung argued that the deeper, hidden part of ourselves, what he called the shadow, is where we bury the traits we deem unacceptable, the parts of us we believe others won't love or accept. The shadow is filled with our repressed desires, our insecurities, our hidden potential. The trouble is we can't fully love ourselves until we integrate the shadow, the darker, less polished parts of our psyche. And this integration isn't easy. It's uncomfortable, even painful. It demands that we face our fears and confront the parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore. But the shadow isn't just a psychological concept. It has real-world consequences. Friedrich Nietzsche, in his exploration of the human condition, warned of the dangers of self-deception and the denial of the shadow. Nietzsche believed that humanity's greatest obstacle was the unwillingness to confront its true nature. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he introduces the idea of the Übermensch, or overman, an individual who has transcended conventional morality and embraced all aspects of their being, both light and dark. For Nietzsche, self-love and power came not from conforming to society's expectations, but from embracing the totality of who you are. But Nietzsche's philosophy, while revolutionary, presents a problem. How can one truly embrace the self if they're constantly dependent on the world's gaze to validate their worth? The contradiction here is evident. The more we seek approval from others, the further we push away our authentic selves, and the less capable we are of genuine self-love. Arthur Schopenhauer, in his bleak yet penetrating analysis of human nature, went a step further. He argued that human suffering arises from our insatiable desires, which are often rooted in the need for external validation. The more we crave love from others, the more we expose ourselves to suffering. Schopenhauer saw desire as the root of all human misery, and he understood that desire for approval is just one of the many forms this suffering can take. But the desire for approval isn't merely a superficial yearning for compliments or praise. It's an existential hunger. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, took this idea even deeper by suggesting that much of our self-worth is dependent on how we are perceived by others. In Being and Nothingness, Sartre argues that we exist in a constant state of tension between the self and the other. Our identities, our sense of who we are often shaped by how others see us, whether through their gaze, their expectations, or their judgments. In essence, we are in a perpetual struggle to reconcile the self with the other, and until we are free of this dependency, we remain incomplete. But what happens when the gaze of others vanishes? When the external world stops being a mirror for our self-worth? In that moment, you may feel liberated and terrified, because without the reflection of others, what are you left with? This is the deeper philosophical issue we face. We build our identities on foundations that are not our own, on approval, external validation, social acceptance. We're trained to perform, to conform, to meet society's expectations, all in the name of love and belonging. But the moment we begin to seek self-love, to embrace our true nature, we realize that the very structure we've built our lives upon is hollow. The external world's approval is no longer enough. We are left to confront an uncomfortable truth. True self-love requires a radical shift in perspective. It means letting go of the very thing we've built our identities around, the approval and recognition of others. It means accepting the fact that we are enough, not because others say we are, but because we are inherently worthy of love. So, if loving yourself means breaking free from the need for external validation, why does it feel so destabilizing? Why does it feel like the ground beneath your feet is crumbling away when, in reality, it is only the illusion of the world that you are leaving behind? And here's the most unsettling part. Until you let go of the external validation, you can never truly love yourself. You can never fully integrate the parts of yourself that have been hiding in the shadows. You will continue to chase approval and acceptance, believing that these are the keys to your happiness. But in doing so, you will never find the peace, the clarity, and the love that you seek. We've now seen that the desire for external approval is not just a surface-level issue. It's rooted deep in our psychological and philosophical makeup. But understanding the problem is only the first step. The real question now is, what happens when we finally stop seeking approval? How does this shift begin to change everything, both within us and in the world around us? Stay with me as we explore the unseen consequences of this behavior and how it silently shapes both our personal lives and the society we live in. Imagine that you've made the decision. You've chosen to stop seeking validation from others. You've started to shift your focus inward, to embrace the parts of yourself you once tried to hide or reject. This should feel like freedom, right? In some ways, it does. But it also brings with it a profound, unspoken consequence, one that you might not be ready to face. When you stop chasing approval, the world around you shifts, but it doesn't always shift in ways you expect. The people who once surrounded you, the ones whose opinions seemed to matter the most, no longer hold the same power over your emotions. At first, this might seem like liberation, but as their influence wanes, something else begins to happen. You begin to realize how much of your life has been unconsciously shaped by their judgments. Their expectations, criticisms, and praise have been the silent architects of your identity. Now, in the absence of their approval, you're left standing with nothing but your own reflection. But this is where the consequences of seeking validation become truly unsettling. You might begin to feel isolated, not because you've lost relationships, but because you're suddenly forced to confront the depth of your own dependence on them. You realize that you've spent years, perhaps decades, living in reaction to others. You've molded yourself, shaped your behaviors, and adjusted your personality to meet the needs of those around you. What does it mean when these external markers of identity disappear? When the validation that once felt like oxygen becomes irrelevant? Who are you now? This unsettling realization is the first major consequence of breaking free from the external validation trap: disconnection from others. But this disconnection isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's a type of solitude, a solitude that forces you to face your true self without the distractions or distortions created by others. It's an invitation to rebuild your life from the ground up, but it's also terrifying. It's one thing to intellectually understand that you don't need others to validate you. It's another thing entirely to emotionally and psychologically experience that detachment. You begin to see that for much of your life, your relationships have been based on a subtle, unconscious transaction. You gave others what they wanted: a performance, a mask, an idealized version of yourself, in exchange for love, approval, and recognition. But now that the need for approval is gone, the exchange becomes hollow. These relationships, once so crucial to your identity, may start to feel irrelevant, even superficial. This leads to the second consequence: redefining your relationships. You may start to notice that many of your relationships were never based on mutual understanding or genuine connection, but rather on your ability to meet others' expectations. And as you let go of the need for external validation, these relationships may start to feel inauthentic. They may even begin to dissolve. This isn't necessarily a loss, it's a shift. Relationships that once held immense emotional weight may now seem fragile, even transient. You may find yourself questioning the authenticity of the connections you've built over the years. You may find that those who truly appreciate you for who you are, without the need for performance, are few and far between. And yet, the deeper truth here is this: the disintegration of these relationships isn't a loss, but a gift. It's an opportunity to rebuild, not from the external expectations of others, but from a deeper, more authentic sense of self. You may lose people, but you'll gain the ability to form relationships that are grounded in who you truly are, not who you think you need to be. But here's the catch. While this internal shift towards self-love can lead to more authentic relationships, it can also feel like you're stepping into a void. For years, you've defined your value through the lens of others. Now, when their opinions no longer matter, the vastness of this freedom might feel overwhelming, like an empty space that needs to be filled. This leads to the third, unseen consequence: existential disorientation. When you stop seeking validation, you are forced to confront an unsettling truth. You are no longer defined by external forces, and without those external markers, you may feel a sense of emptiness, a feeling of floating in an existential limbo. Who are you without the roles you've played, without the expectations you've lived by, without the image you've projected to the world? This feeling of disorientation can be deeply uncomfortable. You might feel like you're losing your grip on reality, like your sense of self is unraveling in front of your eyes. But this, too, is a necessary part of the process. Because in that emptiness, in that void, you will eventually find your true self. You will find the parts of you that have been buried under the weight of others' expectations. And in embracing that true self, you will realize that the sense of disorientation was simply the shedding of an old, false identity. In psychological terms, this is where cognitive dissonance comes into play. Cognitive dissonance is the mental discomfort that arises when our beliefs or behaviors conflict with new information. In this case, the dissonance is between the person you thought you were, the one defined by external approval, and the person you are now becoming, the one who no longer seeks approval. The mind, in its search for coherence, resists this change. It wants to hold on to the familiar, even if the familiar is based on falsehoods. But the more you push through this discomfort, the more you break free from the need for external validation. The fourth, and perhaps most profound consequence, is the erosion of societal norms. Society itself is built on the foundation of external validation. We live in a culture that is driven by comparisons, by social media, by metrics of success that are measured through likes, followers, and recognition. When you stop participating in this game, when you stop caring about these external measures of worth, you begin to see society for what it truly is: a collection of projections, a stage where everyone is performing. This realization can be both freeing and alienating. You may feel liberated from the chains of societal expectations, but you may also feel like an outsider, someone who no longer fits into the mold. As you detach from the need for external validation, you may start to notice how pervasive these societal pressures are, how deeply embedded they are in every aspect of your life. The disconnect becomes glaring. And while this disillusionment is uncomfortable, it also provides you with an opportunity to create your own values, your own sense of purpose, free from the constraints of societal conditioning. But this sense of alienation is not a permanent state. It's a stage in the process of self-realization, a necessary discomfort before you can step into a more empowered way of being. The moment you stop seeking validation from the outside world is the moment you begin to see the world as it truly is. And in that clarity, you begin to understand your place in it. These unseen consequences are the inevitable byproducts of breaking free from the need for external validation. At first, they may seem like losses: loss of relationships, loss of identity, loss of belonging. But in reality, they are not losses at all. They are invitations to reclaim your true self, to break free from the chains of societal expectations, and to build a life that is entirely your own. But how do you navigate this difficult journey? How do you break free from these unseen forces without losing yourself in the process? The answer lies in a radical shift of perspective, a shift that will allow you to reclaim your sense of self and build a new, more authentic life. You've lived most of your life under a specific set of rules, rules that have been dictated by others. by society, by your upbringing. These rules were never your own. They were the beliefs, expectations, and judgments of those around you, shaping who you thought you should be. And yet, now, you've reached the point of no return. You've decided to break free. But here's the question that will determine whether you succeed or fail. How? The path to liberation isn't a straight line. It isn't some quick fix or a one-size-fits-all formula. It's a process of radical self-redefinition. But before you can truly step into your own, there is one crucial realization you must make. The person you are without external validation isn't a blank slate. It's the person you were always meant to be, buried under layers of other people's expectations. This isn't an easy path. It's the path of the rebel, the outsider, the one who dares to question everything. It's the path of breaking apart your identity and rebuilding it piece by piece on your own terms. But it's also the most liberating thing you can do. Step 1. The radical decision. The first step in this rebellion is making a decision to stop seeking approval, to stop shaping yourself based on the judgments of others. This is not a passive choice. It's not simply a matter of saying, I won't care what others think. It's an active, radical choice to remove external validation from the equation entirely. The moment you decide to stop seeking approval, you stop giving others power over you. This isn't about rejecting others or isolating yourself from the world. It's about creating a space where you can be yourself, unfiltered, unadulterated by the expectations of others. But here's the catch. This decision will shake you to your core. You will feel the discomfort, the fear, the insecurity of letting go of what you've relied on for so long. The first time you make a decision purely for yourself, without worrying about what others think, you'll likely feel exposed, vulnerable, even scared. This decision will bring a sense of instability as your old identity starts to collapse. But here's the liberating truth. You are not losing yourself. You are finding yourself. The need for others to validate you is like a leash that's been tied to your soul. The moment you let go, you're free to move in ways you never could before. And though this freedom might feel terrifying at first, it's also the most exhilarating thing you'll ever experience. Step 2. Embrace the void. After the initial decision, the next step is to sit in the emptiness, the space between who you were and who you are becoming. When you remove external validation from your life, the first thing you'll encounter is a sense of void, a space where the weight of your old identity once rested. But don't be afraid of this emptiness. Embrace it, sit in it. It's in this void that your true self can begin to emerge. This emptiness is not something to fill with distractions, achievements, or social approval. It's a fertile ground where you can begin to grow a new, truer version of yourself. The key here is to allow yourself to feel what you feel without judgment, to experience the discomfort of uncertainty, the fear of being alone in your own identity, without rushing to fill it with old patterns. This is where the work of shadow integration comes in. The shadow, as Jung described it, is the unconscious part of yourself that holds all the traits, desires, and parts of you that society has taught you to suppress. When you stop seeking approval, you create the space to confront this shadow. You can begin to integrate the parts of yourself you've hidden away. These parts might be messy, uncomfortable, or even shameful, but they are yours. And when you embrace them, you embrace your authenticity. This is the most radical act of rebellion you can take. The acceptance of yourself, unconditionally, with all your contradictions, flaws, and imperfections. You no longer need to justify your existence to anyone. You simply are, and in that acceptance, you reclaim your power. Step 3. Question everything. As you move forward, you will begin to see the world through a new lens. The societal norms, the expectations, the rules that once shaped your reality, they will seem foreign to you. You will begin to question everything. Why do we live the way we do? Why do we chase after superficial goals? Why do we define success through the eyes of others? This process of questioning is not a rejection of society, but a radical re-evaluation of what truly matters. It's the beginning of the end of unconscious living. You no longer accept the world's definitions of happiness, success, or worth. You begin to see that true fulfillment is an inner experience, not something defined by external achievement. Nietzsche famously wrote that, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." When you stop seeking external validation, you are forced to confront your why. Why do you do the things you do? What is the purpose of your life? Free from the influence of others. This is where you begin to shape your own values, your own purpose. But here's the radical twist. Your values are no longer about what society expects of you. They are about what resonates with your authentic self. This shift can be deeply unsettling at first because it means abandoning the safety of societal norms, but it also means stepping into a life that is completely your own. Step 4. Rebuild relationships. As you detach from the need for external validation, your relationships with others will inevitably change. Some will fall away, others will deepen. The relationships that were based on performance or mutual validation will begin to dissolve, but the ones that were grounded in authenticity and mutual respect will only grow stronger. This is the paradox of self-love. By loving yourself, you create space for others to love you more fully, for who you truly are. When you no longer need to perform for others, when you no longer rely on their approval for your sense of self-worth, your relationships will transform from transactional to deeply authentic. You will find that those who love you for your true self, without conditions, without expectations, will stand by you in ways you never imagined. And importantly, you will start to attract people who resonate with your authenticity. The act of being true to yourself will create new opportunities for connection, but on a far deeper, more meaningful level. Step 5. Live with purpose, not approval. Now that you've let go of the need for validation, you must shift your focus entirely. The key to this rebellion is to live with purpose, not for approval, not for recognition, not for validation, but for the intrinsic value of living fully and authentically. When you no longer rely on the approval of others, you begin to take bold action, not because you want praise, but because it aligns with your true values. You start to live according to your own principles, your own vision for your life. You no longer fear rejection because you've already accepted yourself. You no longer measure your worth by others' opinions, but by how closely you align with your own inner truth. This, ultimately, is the ultimate rebellion, to live your life not in response to others, but as an expression of your own unique, authentic self. To live with purpose, grounded in your own values, unshackled by the fear of judgment. Breaking free from the need for external validation is no easy task. It's a rebellion against everything you've known, everything you've been taught to believe about your worth and your place in the world. But in this rebellion, you'll find your greatest power, the ability to create a life that is truly your own. It's a path filled with discomfort, uncertainty, and even fear. But on the other side, you'll find a profound sense of freedom, authenticity, and self-love that transcends anything you could have imagined. You'll find that, in letting go of the need for others to define you, you finally become who you were always meant to be. It's time to confront the truth that has been quietly hiding beneath every word, every decision, every step you've taken on this journey. You've made the radical decision to stop seeking validation from others. You've embraced the discomfort of the void and the challenge of questioning everything you thought you knew about yourself and the world. You've taken the difficult yet liberating path towards self-redefinition, letting go of societal approval and embracing a new, authentic version of yourself. But here's the ultimate revelation that ties all of this together. The moment you stop seeking approval is the moment you discover your inherent worth, independent of anyone, anything, or any external force. Let that sink in. You see, the ultimate truth isn't just about freedom from validation. It's not merely about escaping the chains of societal expectations. It's about realizing that you have always been enough. All along, in every moment, in every iteration of yourself, you were whole, you were worthy, you were complete, not because of others' opinions, but because of the fundamental truth of your own existence. This realization is a paradox. On the one hand, you've fought tooth and nail to reclaim your sense of self from the opinions and judgments of others. You've faced your shadows, confronted your insecurities, and taken a sledgehammer to the false self that you once thought was you. But on the other hand, you've just discovered that there was never anything to reclaim in the first place. The true you was always there, waiting to be recognized, not built, not crafted, not performed. This is the cosmic joke of the human experience. In trying to find yourself, you've only had to remember what was always true. The moment you stop seeking validation is the moment you tap into something deeper, something eternal. You step into a space where time, judgment, and comparison no longer matter. You stop living in reaction to the world around you and instead begin to create from the inside out. And that is when the real transformation happens, not just in your external life, but in your internal world. This profound realization echoes through the teachings of thinkers like Nietzsche, Jung, and Sartre, who all understood that the search for external validation is ultimately a denial of the self. They knew that true power and freedom come not from what others think of you, but from how you perceive and embrace your own existence. Nietzsche's idea of the Übermensch, or Overman, was one of creating meaning and value from within, independent of external forces. Similarly, Carl Jung's notion of individuation, of becoming the fullest expression of yourself, was a journey of rediscovering and integrating all parts of yourself, including the shadow, and realizing that wholeness is the birthright of every human being. This is the deepest, most powerful truth you can hold. You are not defined by others, you are defined by you. The power of self-love. And that is where the real magic begins, when you realize that self-love isn't a self-indulgent, superficial concept. It's a radical act of liberation. It's the highest form of rebellion against a society that teaches you to look outside of yourself for worth. Self-love is not about self-congratulation or feeding the ego. It's about recognizing your inherent worth in its raw, unadulterated form, independent of anyone else's opinion. The truth is, when you stop needing others to affirm your existence, you begin to create your own affirmations. You stop looking for someone else's approval to validate your choices. You stop waiting for a stamp of approval before you take action. You start to trust your own judgment, your own instincts, and most importantly, your own heart. The final, most profound truth is this. When you love yourself in the purest sense, you no longer need anyone else to love you the way you want to be loved. You no longer rely on others to provide you with the emotional nourishment that you've been desperately seeking. You realize that you are enough exactly as you are, without the need for someone else to fill that gap. The absence of approval. But here's the catch. When you reach this level of self-love, something interesting happens. The people who once validated you, who once shaped your life with their opinions and judgments, will begin to disappear from your world, not in a dramatic, abrupt sense, but in a quiet, subtle way. It's as if the universe, or whatever force you believe in, aligns itself with your newfound authenticity. Those who no longer resonate with your true self will slowly fade out of your life. The friendships that were built on performance, the relationships that depended on your compliance with others' expectations, these will naturally dissipate. You see, the moment you embrace your true self, the people who still live by the rules of external validation will no longer be able to meet you at that level. You won't need their approval, and because you no longer need it, they will lose their ability to affect you. Your relationships with them will change, often without you having to do anything at all. This isn't a loss, it's an opportunity. When those who have been lingering in your life fade away, you make space for those who resonate with your authentic self. The people who enter your life now will be there because they see you, truly see you, not a projection of who you think you should be. These are the relationships that will endure. These are the connections that will nourish you, because they are not based on external validation. They are rooted in the purest form of love, acceptance of each other as you truly are. The final revelation, you are the creator. The deepest and most radical truth that emerges is this. You are the creator of your own life, your own value, and your own reality. The world has conditioned you to believe that your worth is determined by others, by your social status, your accomplishments, your image. But this is a lie. The truth is that your worth is intrinsic. It is an inherent part of your being, not something that needs to be earned or validated by anyone else. Once you step into this truth, you become free, free from the fear of rejection, free from the need for approval, free from the shackles of societal expectations. Now, you can create your life from the deepest place of authenticity. You can choose the path that feels true to you, not the path that others have laid out. You can shape your identity, your relationships, and your future with the power of self-determination. You are no longer at the mercy of others' judgments. You are free to live your life on your own terms. This is the ultimate realization, the ultimate truth. The moment you stop seeking validation from others is the moment you stop being a passive participant in your life and become its active creator. The moment you stop needing approval is the moment you can finally become everything you were meant to be. You are whole, you are enough, you are free. As you stand in the quiet after this realization, One thought should echo in your mind. You are no longer waiting for others to give you permission to be yourself. You've already given yourself that permission. And in this quiet, profound stillness, you realize that the people who once validated you, those who shaped your identity with their opinions and expectations, they were never the key to your freedom. You were. The moment you stop seeking approval from others is the moment you find yourself, fully, completely, unapologetically. And once you do, the world around you will shift, aligning itself with the power of your authentic self.